The evening air was cool as Keanu Reeves walked slowly down Beverly Boulevard. After 14 hours on set, his body ached from performing his own stunts. He wore simple blue jeans, a black t-shirt, and his favorite worn leather jacket, comfortable clothes that let him blend into the city he loved. Keanu posed in front of a gleaming restaurant with Luciano's written in elegant gold script above the door. Soft light spilled onto the sidewalk from its windows, and the gentle sounds of conversation and clinking glasses drifted outward. A small smile crossed his face as he looked at the building. 6 months ago, Keanu had purchased this restaurant through one of his private companies. The previous owner had been struggling with debt, and the staff, some who had worked there for decades, had been weeks away from losing their jobs. Keanu had stepped in quietly, as was his way. No press releases, no fanfare. Just a simple business deal that saved 35 jobs. What almost no one knew was that he was now the owner. Only Alina, the restaurant manager, was aware of this fact. Keanu had asked her to keep his ownership private. He wanted to observe how the restaurant really operated when nobody knew the famous actor was watching. "Time for another visit," he said quietly to himself, pushing open the heavy wooden door. Inside, Luciano's was everything a luxury restaurant should be. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. White tablecloths covered every table. Waiters in crisp black uniforms moved efficiently between tables, serving Los Angeles elite with professional smiles. The host station was empty for a moment, and Keanu took the time to observe the dining room. Tuesday nights were usually quieter, but tonight at least half the tables were full. Good progress, he thought. When he bought the place, they'd been lucky to fill a quarter of the restaurant on weeknights. "Can I help you?" A sharp voice interrupted his thoughts. Keanu turned to see a young man with slicked back hair and a stiff posture looking him up and down with obvious judgment. His name tag read Marcus, and a pin on his lapel indicated he was new to the staff. "Good evening," Keanu said softly. "Table for one, please." Marcus didn't try to hide his frown as he looked down at his reservation book. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" The way he said "sir" made it sound more like an insult than a courtesy. "No, I don't. But I see several empty tables. Would one of those be available?" Keanu's voice remained gentle. The host sighed dramatically. "I suppose we could fit you in." He grabbed a menu and turned without checking if Keanu followed. "This way." Despite the many open tables in the main dining area, Marcus led Keanu to the very back of the restaurant, right next to the swinging kitchen doors where servers rushed in and out. It was the worst table in the house, noisy, busy, and far from the pleasant atmosphere of the main dining room. "Will this work?" Marcus asked with a thin smile, clearly not caring about the answer. "Actually," Keanu began, "I was hoping for something." "This is what we have available for walk-ins without proper attire," Marcus cut him off, nodding dismissively at Keanu's casual clothes. "The chef's special is the sea bass tonight. Your server will be with you shortly." He dropped the menu on the table and walked away before Keanu could respond. Keanu sat down slowly, watching Marcus return to his post. Through the front windows, he could see at least 12 empty tables with reserved signs that had been there since his arrival. He opened the menu with a thoughtful expression. This visit was already proving more educational than he had expected. Keanu settled into his uncomfortable chair, trying to shift away from the constant swinging of the kitchen doors behind him. Every few seconds, another waiter rushed past, sometimes bumping his chair. The noise from the kitchen, chatting chefs, clattering pots, and the hiss of steam made it hard to enjoy the soft piano music playing in the main dining room. 10 minutes passed, and no server approached his table. Keanu watched as customers who arrived after him were promptly greeted, served water, and offered wine suggestions. He made eye contact with a few staff members, but they quickly looked away, following Marcus's lead and pretending not to see him. Finally, a waiter with tired eyes and Derek on his name tag stopped at his table. "Water?" he asked, already pouring before Keanu could answer. "Thank you," Keanu said. "I'd also like to order." "I'll be back in a minute." Derek cut him off, already turning away. Another 15 minutes passed. Keanu observed the restaurant's operations with interest despite his growing hunger. He noticed how some tables received constant attention while others waited too long between service. He watched the way certain servers spoke differently to guests based on what they were wearing or how they spoke. From across the dining room, he spotted Alina, the manager, talking with a group of well-dressed diners. She hadn't noticed him yet. Keanu decided to wait and see how the evening unfolded without her intervention. When Derek finally returned, Keanu smiled warmly. "I'd like to try the sea bass, please." "We're out," Derek replied bluntly, though Keanu had just overheard him recommend it to another table. "What would you suggest instead?" Keanu asked. Derek shrugged. "The chicken is fine, or pasta." Before Keanu could ask about specific dishes, Marcus appeared at the table, leaning down with a false smile. "Is our guest finding everything satisfactory?" he asked Derek, speaking as if Keanu weren't there. "I was just trying to order," Keanu explained. "I heard the sea bass is excellent." Marcus turned to him with raised eyebrows. "The sea bass is our premium dish. It's $78. He emphasized the price slowly as if speaking to someone who couldn't understand numbers. "That sounds perfect," Keanu replied calmly. Marcus and Derek exchanged glances. "Very well," Marcus said with a smirk. "And perhaps sir would like our finest wine as well, the Chateau Margaux? Only $800 per bottle." A woman at a nearby table looked over, embarrassed by the loud, mocking tone Marcus was using. "Just water is fine for now," Keanu answered. "Thank you." Marcus snorted quietly. "Derek will place your order." He walked away, stopping at another table where he immediately transformed into a completely different person, attentive, warm, and respectful. Keanu took a sip of water and noticed a family being seated at a prime table by the window. They were dressed casually, much like him, but the father wore an expensive watch that caught the light. Marcus was all smiles with them. When his food finally arrived nearly 40 minutes later, Keanu discovered they had brought him chicken despite his order. The plate was slid onto his table without comment. "Excuse me," he called as Derek walked away. "I ordered the sea bass." Derek turned back with an annoyed expression. "Chef says we're out. This is what's available." At the table directly next to Keanu's, a man in a business suit received a beautiful portion of sea bass with elegant presentation. The smell of fresh herbs and butter made its way to Keanu's table. Just then, Alina looked up from her conversation across the room. Her eyes widened in recognition and alarm as she spotted Keanu sitting at the worst table in the restaurant with the wrong dish in front of him. She quickly excused herself and began making her way through the crowded dining room toward him. Keanu watched her approach, wondering how this small drama would unfold. He had seen enough to know that Luciano's had serious problems that went beyond food and straight to the heart of how people were treated. Alina moved quickly between tables, her face a mask of professional calm that barely concealed her panic. Before she could reach Keanu, Marcus intercepted her, touching her elbow and steering her toward a table of loud businessmen who were demanding attention. "They're asking for the manager," he said firmly. "The guy in the corner can wait." Alina glanced anxiously toward Keanu, who gave her a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He didn't want special treatment. He wanted to see the real Luciano's, not the version that would emerge if staff knew who he was. Reluctantly, Alina allowed herself to be led to the other table, throwing one more worried look over her shoulder. Keanu looked down at the chicken dish in front of him. It wasn't what he ordered, and it had clearly been sitting under a heat lamp too long. The edges were dry, the sauce congealed. He cut into it anyway, took a small bite, and set down his fork. The chicken was overcooked and underseasoned, nothing like the quality food Luciano's had once been known for. At a nearby table, a woman complained that her steak was undercooked. Marcus rushed over, apologized profusely, and whisked the plate away with promises of immediate attention from the chef. The contrast with Keanu's treatment was striking. 20 minutes passed. Keanu's water glass remained empty. No one asked how his meal was or if he needed anything else. He watched as other diners received attentive service, dessert menus, and coffee. When Derek finally returned, he didn't ask about the mostly untouched chicken. He simply reached for the plate. "Was there a problem with your meal?" Keanu asked, curious how the server would respond. Derek paused, looking surprised that Keanu had addressed him directly. "Excuse me? I noticed most people seem to be enjoying their food. I wondered if there might be a problem in the kitchen tonight. My chicken was very overcooked." Derek's expression hardened. "The food is excellent. Perhaps your tastes are not refined enough for our establishment." From behind them, Marcus approached with a smug smile. "Is our guest complaining about the food now?" He didn't bother keeping his voice down. Perhaps McDonald's would be more to your liking next time. Several diners at nearby tables shifted uncomfortably in their seats. An older couple exchanged disapproving glances. I was hoping to try dessert, Keanu said calmly. Marcus let out a short, sharp laugh. Of course you were. He turned to Derek. Bring the check instead. I think our guest has had enough of Luciano's hospitality. Derek nodded and hurried away, returning moments later with a black leather folder containing the bill. He dropped it on the table without a word and walked away. Keanu opened the folder and raised his eyebrows. The check included charges for the sea bass he never received, a bottle of mineral water he never ordered, and a 25% service charge that wasn't mentioned on the menu. The total was over $300. When he looked up, Marcus was watching him from across the room with a satisfied expression, clearly expecting him to protest or possibly be unable to pay. Instead, Keanu calmly removed his wallet and placed his credit card in the folder. The black card, reserved for high-wealth clients, gleamed under the chandelier light. The atmosphere in the restaurant had grown noticeably tense. Several guests had witnessed the poor treatment, and whispers circulated through the dining room. A couple at a nearby table were squinting at Keanu, as if trying to place where they had seen him before. When Derek returned with the credit card machine, his eyes widened slightly at the card. He processed the payment silently, then handed Keanu the receipt to sign. Is there anything else you need, sir? Derek asked, his tone suddenly more respectful. Keanu signed the receipt and added a 50% tip, then looked up at the startled waiter. Actually, yes. Could you please ask Elena to meet me outside in 5 minutes? Tell her it's important. Derek's face paled slightly. You know Ms. Elena? We're old friends, Keanu replied quietly, standing up. Thank you for an educational evening. As he walked toward the exit, he felt Marcus watching him with new uncertainty. The host hadn't expected this turn of events, and for the first time that night, he looked worried. Outside Luciano's, the night air had grown cooler. Keanu stood beneath a decorative street lamp that cast gentle light over the sidewalk. He watched people walk past, couples holding hands, groups of friends laughing, solo diners heading home. None gave him a second glance in his simple clothes, which was exactly how he preferred it. The restaurant door opened, and Elena hurried out. Her normally perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and worry lines creased her forehead. She looked up and down the street before spotting him in the lamp's glow. Mr. Reeves, she said quietly as she approached. I am so incredibly sorry about what happened in there. I had no idea you were coming tonight. Keanu smiled gently. That was the point, Elena. I wanted to see how things really work when no one knows I'm watching. Elena's shoulders dropped. And what you saw was terrible. Marcus is new, just started last week. I should have been monitoring him more closely. It wasn't just Marcus, Keanu said, shaking his head. Though he was certainly the most obvious problem. I watched at least 4 tables receive poor service. I saw kitchen staff arguing. And the food. He paused. The sea bass that supposedly ran out was being served to other tables all night. The chicken I received was practically inedible. Elena's face flushed with shame. Chef Antonio left 3 weeks ago. His replacement isn't working out, but I was afraid to make another change so soon. She looked down at her hands. I'm failing at my job, aren't I? A couple exited the restaurant behind them, the man loudly complaining about slow service. They brushed past without recognizing Keanu. You're not failing, Keanu said after they passed, but the restaurant is. We're failing those people. We're failing our staff. This isn't what I wanted when I bought Luciano's. What do you want to do? Elena asked. Fire Marcus? Find a new chef? I can have it done by tomorrow. Keanu was quiet for a moment, watching the restaurant through the large front windows. Inside, he could see Marcus laughing with another server, pointing to where Keanu had been sitting. The image troubled him deeply. No, he finally said. Firing people isn't the answer. Luciano's has a culture problem. When I bought this place, I didn't just want to save jobs. I wanted to create something special, a place where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of who they are or what they're wearing. But what Marcus did, Elena began, was terrible. Keanu finished for her. And it reflects a deeper issue. Did you see how many staff members watched what was happening and did nothing? How many guests looked uncomfortable but stayed silent? Alina nodded slowly. It's not just Marcus. Exactly. Keanu pushed his hands into his jacket pockets and leaned against the lamppost. I'd like you to call a mandatory staff meeting for tomorrow morning before opening. All staff, from dishwashers to hosts. Can you do that? Of course, Alina said. What time? 10 a.m., and don't tell them why or that I'll be there. He paused, looking back at the restaurant. There's something else. Does Marcus need this job? Alina seemed surprised by the question. Yes, actually. He mentioned he's supporting his mother who's ill. Despite his attitude, he hasn't missed a shift. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. Interesting. People are complex, aren't they? We never really know someone's full story. Are you going to give him another chance? Alina asked, clearly surprised. I'm going to give everyone another chance, Keanu replied, including myself. I should have been more involved from the beginning. A black car pulled up to the curb, and the driver nodded at Keanu. My ride's here, he said. I'll see you tomorrow at 10, and Alina, please don't worry too much. Every restaurant has problems. The good ones fix them. As Keanu stepped toward the car, Alina called after him. Mr. Reeves, thank you for not giving up on us. Keanu smiled. Thank you for caring enough to be upset. That's where change begins. As the car pulled away from Luciano's, Keanu looked back at the glowing restaurant windows. Tomorrow would be interesting. Tomorrow would be a new beginning. The car moved smoothly through the Los Angeles night, carrying Keanu away from Luciano's. Streetlights flashed across his face as he stared out the window, deep in thought. The driver, sensing his mood, kept the radio low and didn't attempt conversation. Would you like to go straight home, sir? The driver finally asked as they approached an intersection. Keanu considered for a moment. No. Could we drive by the beach first? I need some time to think. 20 minutes later, Keanu walked alone along the nearly empty shoreline. The sound of waves breaking against the sand calmed his mind. He had removed his shoes, letting the cool water occasionally wash over his feet as he considered what had happened at the restaurant. The disrespect hadn't bothered him personally. After decades in Hollywood, he had developed a thick skin. What troubled him was what it represented. How quickly people judged others based on appearance. How easily kindness was abandoned when someone was deemed unimportant. Keanu stopped walking and looked out at the dark ocean. A memory surfaced from his early days as an actor, long before fame found him. He had saved for weeks to take his mother to a nice restaurant for her birthday. They had been seated by the bathroom, ignored by servers, and made to feel unwelcome, all because they didn't look wealthy enough. And nothing's changed, he whispered to the waves. He thought about Marcus, the rude host. There was something familiar in the young man's behavior, a defensive arrogance that often masked insecurity. Keanu had met many people like him in Hollywood, people who treated those they considered unimportant poorly while fawning over those with status. But firing Marcus wouldn't solve the problem. It would just move it somewhere else. Keanu walked for another hour, planning what he would say at tomorrow's meeting. By the time he returned to the car, he had made up his mind about how to handle the situation. Back at his modest home, Keanu made a cup of tea and sat at his kitchen table with a notebook. He began writing ideas for changes at Luciano's, not just addressing yesterday's incident, but transforming the restaurant's entire culture. He wrote until 2 a.m., filling pages with thoughts about respect, dignity, and second chances. When he finally went to bed, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in months. Morning came quickly. Keanu woke at 7 a.m., showered, and dressed carefully. Today, he chose clothes that reflected his status, a well-tailored dark suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. Not to intimidate, but to make a point about assumptions. At 9:45 a.m., he pulled into the parking lot behind Luciano's. Staff members were already arriving, looking confused about the unexpected meeting. Keanu waited in his car, watching through the rear entrance as they filed in. At 9:55, he spotted Marcus arriving, rushing slightly as if running late. The young man straightened his uniform jacket before entering, unaware that his life was about to change. Alina met Keanu at the back door at exactly 10 a.m. Everyone's here, she said nervously. They're in the main dining room. Marcus is sitting in the back, looking worried. I think Derek told him you know me. How many staff total? Keanu asked. 32 today. Almost everyone made it on such short notice. Keanu nodded. Before we go in, I want to make something clear. This isn't about punishment. It's about growth. Elena looked relieved. I'm glad to hear that. Despite everything, these are mostly good people. I believe that, Keanu said. Even the difficult ones. He took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. What happened next would determine the future of Luciano's. More importantly, it might change the lives of everyone involved, including his own. Let's do this, he said, and followed Elena into the restaurant where 32 employees waited, completely unaware that their boss was about to walk through the door. The dining room fell silent as Keanu entered beside Elena. 32 pairs of eyes widened in recognition. Several gasps echoed through the space. A young dishwasher whispered, "No way." In the back row, Marcus's face drained of color as recognition dawned. Elena cleared her throat. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Keanu Reeves. Many of you know him as an actor, but there's something else you should know." She paused, looking around the room. "Mr. Reeves is the owner of Luciano's. He has been for the past 6 months." The silence deepened. A server in the front row covered her mouth with her hand. The head chef crossed his arms, looking both impressed and concerned. "Thank you, Elena," Keanu said, his voice soft but carrying throughout the room. He moved to the center of the dining area, making eye contact with various staff members. "I want to start by saying that I'm not here to fire anyone." The tension in the room decreased slightly, though Marcus remained frozen in his chair. "I visited Luciano's last night as a regular customer. I wore casual clothes. I didn't make a reservation. I wanted to experience this restaurant the way an ordinary person would." Keanu walked slowly between the tables. "What I saw troubled me deeply." He stopped in front of a table where 4 servers sat together. "I saw some of you working very hard. I saw genuine smiles and care for certain guests." He moved again, now standing near the kitchen staff. "I tasted food that was prepared with less care than it should have been." Finally, he approached the back row where Marcus sat staring at the floor. "And I experienced treatment that no human being deserves, regardless of who they are or what they're wearing." Marcus looked up, his eyes filled with fear and shame. The staff members around him moved slightly away, creating distance between themselves and what they now perceived as a problem. "Marcus," Keanu said gently, "would you stand up, please?" The young host rose slowly, his legs visibly shaking. "Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry, I didn't know." Keanu held up his hand. "I know you didn't. That's the point." He turned to address the entire room. "Many years ago, before I was successful, I took my mother to a restaurant for her birthday. We saved for months for that meal." His voice grew softer, more personal. "The staff treated us terribly because we didn't look important enough. My mother pretended it didn't bother her, but I saw the hurt in her eyes." Several staff members looked down, recognizing similar behavior in themselves. "Yesterday, I wasn't hurt by how I was treated," Keanu continued. "But I was disappointed. Not just in individuals, but in what we've created here." He gestured around the restaurant. "This beautiful space should be about more than just expensive food. It should be about dignity. Every single person who walks through that door deserves respect." He turned back to Marcus, "Including you." Marcus blinked in confusion. "Sir?" "I'm not going to fire you, Marcus. That would be easy, but it wouldn't solve anything." Keanu looked around the room. "I'm not going to fire anyone. Instead, I'm going to ask something harder of all of you. I'm asking you to help me transform Luciano's." Elena stepped forward with a large whiteboard that she had prepared. At the top, written in bold letters, were the words, "Respect favor all." "Starting today," Keanu explained, "we're implementing new policies. But more importantly, we're creating a new culture. Every guest will be treated with the same respect, regardless of what they're wearing, how they speak, or whether we recognize their name." He walked back to the center of the room, commanding everyone's attention. "I believe in second chances. I believe people can change when given the opportunity. So that's what I'm offering all of you today, a fresh start." Marcus wiped a tear from his cheek. The chef straightened his posture. A young server in the front row nodded with determination. Keanu smiled at his staff. "Now, who's ready to build something special together?" 32 hands raised into the air, including Marcus's. the highest of them all. The meeting lasted 3 hours, far longer than anyone had expected. Keanu pulled a chair into the center of the room and invited staff to share their thoughts and experiences. At first, people were hesitant to speak up in front of their famous boss, but gradually the dam broke. A veteran server named Maria described how certain managers encouraged staff to judge customers by their appearance. "We were told to give better tables to people who look like big spenders," she admitted. "It became normal to us." The sous chef explained how kitchen quality had declined after the head chef left. "We've been cutting corners to save money," he confessed, "using cheaper ingredients but charging the same prices." Throughout the discussion, Keanu listened intently, asking thoughtful questions without judgment. He took notes in a small black notebook, occasionally nodding as patterns emerged. Most surprising to everyone was when Marcus raised his hand to speak. The young host stood nervously, all eyes on him. "I want to apologize," he began, his voice shaking. "Not just to Mr. Reeves, but to everyone. I've been treating people badly because I thought that's what fancy restaurants do." He paused, swallowing hard. "My mom always taught me better than that." Keanu nodded encouragingly. "What changed your perspective, Marcus?" Marcus looked down at his hands. "My mother got sick last year. Cancer. I took this job because it pays well, and we need the money for her treatments." His voice grew softer. "Last night when I got home, she asked about my day. I couldn't tell her how I'd behaved. I couldn't admit I'd become someone she wouldn't recognize." The room was completely silent. Even the kitchen staff, usually restless during meetings, were still. "Thank you for sharing that," Keanu said, standing to place a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Honesty is where change begins." As the meeting continued, something remarkable happened. Staff members began offering solutions rather than just pointing out problems. The head bartender suggested a weekly rotating, everyone's welcome special, quality food at a lower price point to attract diverse customers. The hostess proposed removing the dress code entirely. A busboy shyly recommended staff training about unconscious bias. By the end of the meeting, Alina's whiteboard was filled with ideas. Keanu stood before his staff one last time. "Starting today, we're implementing 3 immediate changes," he announced. "First, no more judging guests by appearance. Everyone gets equal service. Second, we're returning to quality ingredients in every dish. And third, we're creating a new position, hospitality ambassador, someone who will ensure every guest feels welcome." He turned to look directly at Marcus. "I'd like to offer this position to you, Marcus. Your experience yesterday makes you uniquely qualified to recognize when someone isn't being treated with respect." Marcus looked stunned. "Me? But after how I behaved?" "Sometimes the people who make mistakes have the most to teach us," Keanu replied. "Your honesty today showed character. The position includes a salary increase to help with your mother's medical bills." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help make Luciano's better," Keanu suggested. "I will," Marcus promised. "I'll make you proud." As the meeting dispersed, staff members approached Keanu one by one, thanking him for the second chance. The energy in the restaurant had completely transformed, from fear to determination, from division to unity. When only Keanu and Elena remained, she smiled at him. "You handled that perfectly. They respect you even more now." Keanu shook his head. "It's not about respect for me. It's about respect for everyone who walks through that door." He glanced around the beautiful restaurant. "Shall we get to work?" "We open in 3 hours." Elena grinned. "Yes, we do. And I have a feeling tonight will be very different from last night." "That's the plan," Keanu replied, rolling up his sleeves. "That's definitely the plan." 6 months had passed since the morning meeting that changed everything at Luciano's. The restaurant had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. On a busy Friday evening, a line of customers stretched outside the door. Inside, every table was filled with a diverse mix of people, some in elegant evening wear, others in casual jeans and t-shirts. The atmosphere was warm and vibrant, filled with conversation and laughter. At the host station, Marcus stood tall in a tailored suit with a new pin on his lapel that read Hospitality Ambassador. His smile was genuine as he greeted an elderly couple who had arrived without a reservation. "Of course we have room for you," he assured them, personally escorting them to a lovely table by the window, the same table where, 6 months earlier, he would have seated only the most obviously wealthy guests. In the kitchen, a renewed energy flowed. The new head chef, promoted from within, had brought back quality and creativity to every dish. Staff members moved with purpose, pride evident in their work. Elena watched it all from near the bar, checking details and ensuring everything ran smoothly. When her phone buzzed with a text message, she smiled at the screen. "He's coming," she announced to the staff during their quick pre-dinner meeting. "Mr. Reeves will be here in 20 minutes. Same rules as always, treat him exactly like any other guest." The staff nodded, excited but professional. These visits had become regular over the past months, sometimes with Keanu arriving in a suit, other times in his casual clothes. The staff had learned to provide the same excellent service regardless. When Keanu walked through the door in jeans and his favorite leather jacket, Marcus greeted him with the same warm respect he showed to every guest. "Good evening, Mr. Reeves. Table for one?" "Yes, thank you, Marcus. How's your mother doing?" Marcus beamed. "Much better. The treatments are working. The doctors are very hopeful." "I'm glad to hear that," Keanu said sincerely. As Marcus led him to a table, Keanu noticed subtle changes since his last visit. New artwork from local artists brightened the walls. A small sign near the entrance read, "All are welcome here." The menu now included a section called Community Classics, high-quality dishes at accessible prices. Throughout his meal, Keanu observed the restaurant's operations with quiet satisfaction. Servers moved efficiently between tables, treating each guest with equal attention. The food arrived promptly, beautifully presented, and delicious. Nearby, he overheard a young couple mention it was their first time at such a fancy restaurant, yet they looked completely at ease. When Elena stopped by his table, she couldn't contain her excitement. "We've been voted most welcoming restaurant in Los Angeles by the Times," she told him. "The reviewer specifically mentioned our refreshing lack of pretension." "That's wonderful," Keanu said. "How's Marcus doing in his role?" "He's our greatest success story," Elena replied. "He's transformed completely. He even started a mentoring program for new staff members, teaching them about respect and dignity from day one." After finishing his meal, Keanu declined the dessert menu. "Just the check, please." When the server brought his bill, a handwritten note was attached. "6 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my professional life when I judged you by your appearance. Today, I help train others to never make that same mistake. Thank you for the second chance that changed everything. Marcus." Keanu looked across the restaurant to where Marcus was carefully assisting an elderly man with a walker to his table. The young host's face showed genuine concern and respect as he ensured the man was comfortable. As Keanu signed the check, he left a generous tip and his own note. "You didn't just accept a second chance, you created second chances for others. That's real transformation." Walking out of Luciano's into the cool evening air, Keanu felt a sense of quiet pride. The restaurant had become what he had always envisioned, not just a place that served excellent food, but a space where everyone was treated with dignity, regardless of who they were or what they wore. Sometimes, the most powerful lessons came from the most uncomfortable moments. And sometimes, those moments created change that lasted far beyond a single evening.